Welcome in, everybody. It's finally here. The wait is over. Alabama football is back, and so is the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor. And I'm your host, as always, Alex Taylor. And tonight we are setting the stage for a brand new college football season for your Alabama Crimson Tide. Now, there's a new vibe around Tuscaloosa. A lot of people are ready to count Alabama out. They say the dynasty's over. Alabama's season last year was not up to the standard. I'll be the first to admit. They say the standard has slipped. But yet, here we are, week one, heavyweight matchup, staring us right in the face, honestly. And all eyes are on the Tide again. So that's not a coincidence. That's not an accident. That's what happens when you are the standard of the sport. So on tonight's show, we're going to be taking a dive into the Ty Simpson era and everything that goes along with that. Also the running back room. Who's going to step up in Jam's absence? We're going to talk about the staple of this team, which I think is the defense. We're going to talk about some disrespect that's been currently going around from a certain quarterback. And of course, we're going to hop right into the Alabama-Florida State preview. And as always, I will give my expert prediction on this. So sit back and relax and buckle up because the season starts now. Again, welcome back in. If you're just joining us to the season debut for 2025 of the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor. Again, I am your host, Alex Taylor, and it is such a pleasure to be with you again. And we're just going to jump right into things. So, the Alabama offseason. Alabama coming off a 9-4 campaign in 2024, highlighted by a lot of highs, very good highs, and a lot of low lows. Some of the highs I can recall, Alabama, Georgia, an instant classic. Ryan Williams, 75-yard game-winning touchdown. One of the lows, the week after, upset loss to Vanderbilt on the road. Another high, LSU in Baton Rouge. Alabama absolutely dominating the game from start to finish, putting themselves in a good spot for the playoff. Another low, 2 weeks after that at Oklahoma, not even managing a touchdown. Turnovers killed the Tide in that game. And unfortunately, the Tide slipped just outside that 12-team playoff the first season of its existence. And to make matters worse, the Tide then suffered a loss at the hands of Michigan in the bowl game to finish the season 9-4 overall. And players will be the first to tell you that's not the standard at Alabama. Alabama fans will be the first to tell you that's not the standard. And you had to wonder, a lot of questions raised, eyebrows raised, about Kalen DeBoer's ability to field a team in Tuscaloosa. Did he lose the team halfway through the season? Was his coaching style going to fit? This Alabama team at times last year wasn't very disciplined, especially in the penalties, the attitudes. And we did see some more transfer portal exodus after the first window, so to speak. Alabama, of course, lost some guys to the draft. You're replacing guys like Tyler Booker, Jahad Campbell, Malachi Moore, Jalen Milroe. But the thing that intrigued me, and I think intrigued a lot of people, was the spring portal session. Alabama had 0 scholarship players enter the portal in that window. Now, I don't know about you, but that says a testament to the coaching staff. That says a testament to the team. It shows that they're really bought into what this coaching staff and this team can do going from here on out. So again, I've got to give it to the offseason. Another great recruiting class signed as well. A lot of really good freshmen who I think are going to see the field early, which we will speak on some of those in this episode. But we're going to jump right into, our main segment tonight. And the Ty Simpson era officially begins in Tuscaloosa. Jalen Milroe off to the NFL with the Seattle Seahawks. And it is Ty Simpson's time, finally. And from a standpoint, everything starts at the QB position when you're in Tuscaloosa. Ty Simpson is now officially your QB1. We've seen the flashes, we've seen the struggles, we've seen his growth, but overall, we've seen his character. We've seen his dedication to this team. And it's obviously there, or he wouldn't be here. I mean, this kid has had every chance to transfer the last 3 years. The kid was highly touted coming out of high school. Very good athlete. Could have really gone and started anywhere the last 3 or 4 years now, but has grinded it out, trusted the process, and wanted to be at this point that he's at. And now he's here. He's at this point where he's earned it. He's gone through the growing pains. He's and that's a staple and a rarity in the sport today. You don't see guys, especially at the quarterback position, hang around a school like this, especially a highly touted guy. And we're about to really see a guy in Ty that has grown into his role, leadership, toughness, the overall maturation process, and that's what got him the job. And now he's a team captain. So you obviously see that his teammates think the same of him. Another big offseason asset was the addition of offensive coordinator, and Ryan Grubb was an exceptional hire. Obviously having worked with Kalen previously at Washington, Fresno State, Sioux Falls, a few other places as well. They've worked together for a combined total of 12 years. So, they know each other. They know the ins and outs of this offense. And this is going to be I would say, a very different style of offense. It's not going to be what you had last year. This is going to be primarily a throwing offense. And yeah, I think it's going to mix in the run very well because I think we need to run the ball to establish success in the SEC. But tempo, rhythm passing, RPO, pushing the ball vertically, not something we saw a ton of last year. And that's where Ty Simpson, I think, is going to shine in this offense. And the key is, does he have to be a Bryce Young or a Mac Jones or a Tua? No, he just has to be steady. He just has to be consistent. I think that's one thing last year. As much as Jalen Milroe was good with his feet, he lacked in his consistency with his arm. And that's not a shot at him. I'm very thankful for what he did for us the last 2 years. He did some amazing things for us, but then we also had some lows and some struggles, honestly, really because of that quarterback position and his inability to stretch the field. Ty just has to distribute at this point. He just has to protect the ball and use your talent around you at this point. You have Ryan Williams, you have Jeremy Bernard, you have Jalen Hellback, you have a guy like Jam Miller, you have Richard Young, you have A.K. Deer. You've got good tight ends in Josh Suevas, Caleb Edwards, Marshall Pritchett. You've got these guys. So take the opportunity here and use your skill players. You've got one of the best offensive lines in the sport right now protecting you. So you need to trust these guys. And if Ty really hones into that, which I think he's going to, then this offense will hum right along. And Alabama's right back in that playoff conversation. And it's going to start at this. And, frankly, I'm very excited to see this. So, Ty Simpson, QB1. Let me know what you think the stats are going to be for him this year. Let me know what you think his stats are going to be this Saturday as we get to see his really first true road test this week. So now sticking with the offense, we've got to talk about, the elephant in the room. And let's go to the tailback position now. Jam Miller returning for his senior year, coming back, want to improve that draft stock, get one more year, had some unfinished business to take care of. And the obvious question is who's going to tote the rock while Jam is out? Unfortunately, had a little bit of an injury. Will be back for the Georgia game, so that is huge news. so it's not long term. But the question is, with Jam out, that opens the door for an opportunity. Alabama's been known to produce some good tailbacks over the past years. Just a few to come to mind. Obviously, Najee Harris, Brian Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Bo Scarborough, Derrick Henry, Mark Ingram, Trent Richardson, Kenyon Drake, Damian Harris. Several guys, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jason McClellan. Um, you had a lot of those guys. So now it's really just the next guy up at this point. And who are those next guys you could be asking? Well, the first one that comes to mind is Richard Young. Young is entering his third season at the capstone, and very good, aggressive style of back. A very good punishing style that he runs with. So, I think obviously he's going to see some time. Then, for moments like this, if you have an injury to an experienced guy, you want to go to that transfer portal in the offseason and bring in another experienced guy. And I think that's what Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan and the staff really emphasized on that. And you get Dre'Lyn Washington from Louisiana. He's played a lot of ball, has a very quick burst, good change of pace, spark type of back. And he's somebody that has that experience that can come in that is a veteran in that side. So that's somebody who you can't really even bat an eye at, because he has the experience, and that's huge in situations like this when your top guy is down. A guy that intrigues me though is someone that I think a lot of people have not really talked about that much this offseason, but I think he needs a little more conversation, and that's Daniel Hill. He enters his second season at Alabama, redshirted a year ago, was one of the top athletes in the state of Mississippi the year prior. Very physical, very versatile back from what we've seen in spring practice and summer, fall camp. He's very good out of the backfield catching as well. So, that kind of provides another layer for a tailback. You want any of your tailbacks to be well rounded. If you've got a tailback who can run the ball effectively, who's a hard, aggressive a runner, who can hit those gaps, can hit the holes correctly, fights for extra yardage, has that extra burst of speed, but you got a guy who can be versatile out of the backfield and be a receiving threat. Well, that almost makes him like a decoy sometimes, because then they have to account for him. And then you've got guys like a Jeremy and a Ryan and a Jalen and, a Rico Scott and Isaiah Horton that you can stretch the ball all the way down the field with. So again, I think Hill is going to be a guy to watch this season. And you can't forget about A.K. Deer, true freshman. We've seen true freshmen get their opportunities at Alabama. I mean, some of the ones that, really come to mind, TJ Yeldon, first career game, ran for over 100 yards. Obviously, freshman year 2017, Najee Harris had the greatest game of his freshman campaign in the national championship game. Two big runs in the third and fourth quarter that set us up with scores. So again, it's probably going to be running back by committee to start the season with Jam out, but I think you're going to see a lot of guys get a lot of carries. And again, it's kind of a log jam right there. These guys are going to be fighting for this job, and somebody's got to be that RB1 while Jam is out, because I think when Jam does come back, I think, you've got to insert him back into the offense. I think it's got to be strategically, it's got to be carefully, but, getting him back is going to be huge. But with this offensive line, with their size and physicality, I think all the backs are going to look even better. I think they're going to have opportunities to really hit a ton of holes. I think they're going to have opportunities to really break plays out into the open. And Alabama can lean on people again. And this helps Ty Simpson also more than anything. If you have a good stable of backs that can provide, hey, passing game ain't working. And frankly, we'll get into this a little bit later, but the forecast for the game on Saturday is not necessarily the best or the driest. So this could be a game where it comes down to who can run the football more effectively this Saturday. So we're going to see what that leads to. And so now this kind of leads us into our third segment tonight, and the one I'm most excited about. Really the staple of this team this year, I think, and it's the defense. And, just the veteran leadership that is returning. So, in the offseason, the majority of college football teams, they spend their NIL money on these guys in the transfer portal. They spend NIL on high school recruits or just anywhere else, and they're trying to beef up the rosters that way. And that's fine. Whatever works for you works. If that's your system, okay. But Alabama, I think, is taking the strategic approach in the NIL era and using it for what it really needs to be used for. Bringing back your core. And I think that's what really the whole staff really leaned in on this offseason. Because if you look on the defensive side of the ball, Tim Keenan, he's returning. LT Overton, returning. Justin Jefferson, returning. Deontay Lawson, returning. Keon Sabb, returning. Domani Jackson, returning. You've got a lot of guys who could have went pro. Every single guy I just said could have been in the NFL. They chose not to. They came back. You brought back your core. And every single guy I just said is a starter. So, bringing back the core that made your defense what it was a year ago, which I think only improved after the Vanderbilt game, because really it wasn't our defense that lost us games after that. Our defense kept us in games. It was the offense's inability to be consistent. So, up front, starting off, like I said, you got guys like Tim Keenan and LT Overton. Now, granted, Tim Keenan is another injury and, hard to say, but, he'll be out for a few weeks, with tightrope surgery. And it's definitely a big blow on the front because, he is one of the captains. He is one of the leaders. He's got experience. He's the highest rated returning defensive tackle in the country, per the Pro Football Focus Index. But now this gives guys the opportunity to step up. You have third-year player James Smith, a guy who really started coming on late as the year went on last year. You have guys like Jeremiah Beeman. You have Edric Hill. You have Jordan Renaud, who I've heard a lot of great things about, and he's created quite a buzz in camp. You've got Kelby Collins that you brought in as a transfer from Florida, who is from Gardendale, Alabama, who it was down to between Alabama and Florida in his high school cycle. But then, you turn to some other guys like Keon Keeley, former 5-star. Now he's kind of working his way in. You can move LT Overton into that spot if you need to. He's very versatile in what he can play. And, every great Alabama defense has had, a spine, or like I like to say, like a vertebrae. All right? And those names. It was Rolando McClain, C.J. Mosley, Will Anderson, Reggie Ragland, Reuben Foster. Those guys that was just the gel of that whole defense. And when you look at these guys, and when you look at that guy for Alabama, I think it's a lot of people. But obviously, getting Lawson to return was huge because, he's your alpha dog in the middle. He's your signal caller. And having him back experience-wise, that's huge for the team, the morale, the experience, the leadership, and also another captain. So again, adding him, getting Justin Jefferson back, you bring in a transfer like Hill Green from Colorado, who has a lot of experience, who I think is going to contribute immediately. It's going to be kind of a three-pronged inside linebacker tandem there, and I really like that a lot. And really on the outside at the Wolf position, this is the position I'm the most excited about because, leading the charge, you have Quay Russaw, a guy who, again, got better as the season went on a year ago, really started coming on and really making plays. A guy who's just freakishly strong. It's probably the biggest freak on the team in terms of athleticism. And then you got a guy behind him like Johan Pierre, who's just violent at the point of attack. Very twitchy, has good range, has that long reach. He's 6'5". And, honestly, if you if you look at really what some of these true freshmen bring to the table. Justin Hill, 5-star at the Wolf position. Redshirt freshman Noah Carter. This Wolf room is stacked with experience. And then another guy coming back, Jamarian Latham, 6th year with the program. He's won a title here in 2020. So this guy knows the standard. He's dropped some weight. Now he's going to be more versatile at the Wolf position as well. I think that's going to be a big staple for the Alabama defense is that Wolf position and the Bandit role as well. Those are two very key positions in this. And then from there in the secondary, I think, a position group last year that had a lot of question marks because of the inexperience, because of the exodus from the transfer portal the year prior, now becomes the strength of the defense almost. You return a guy like Domani Jackson, who was a lockdown corner a year ago. You return a freshman All-American in Zabian Brown, who is entering his second year as a starter and really, again, as the season went on, got better and got more consistent, grew up, got a lot of experience in these high intensity matchups, like an LSU, like an Auburn, like a Tennessee, and played well. Then you return guys like Bray Hubbard, who's just stepped up when Keon Sabb was hurt a year ago, and now has moved into that starting role in the safety realm. But then you get Keon Sabb to return as well, and now he returns from injury and returns for his senior year. And so you got a good safety tandem there. But the position that I'm the most intrigued about in the secondary is the Husky position. And in a 4-2-5, your Husky has to be extremely dynamic, extremely agile and versatile at the point of attack. They've got to be able to play zone well. They have to be able to play man well. But they also have to provide a lot of run support as well. They have to be that hybrid player. They've got to be that guy who can play like a corner slot. They got to be a guy who can drop back into like a mid safety, almost like a outside linebacker type role. And they've got to read those keys. Very important on RPO read keys, quick slants, anything like that. And, you go to the transfer portal again and, you get a guy like Cam Calhoun from Utah. A guy who played a lot of good ball for the Utes and, was second team All Big 12, had a couple interceptions a year ago. QBR against him was extremely low. So a guy that's extremely versatile there. And then you got a guy like Deshaun Jones who, got good experience a year ago. You can put Red Morgan in that conversation. You can put Xavier Mincy in that conversation. And Xavier Mincy can kind of play corner, safety, and that Husky position. So very versatile in this secondary. And Drake Kirkpatrick Jr., you can't rule him out either as he has kind of swapped around. But a guy I'm excited about, and true freshman that really has everybody talking before this Saturday, and I think that you will see on the field this Saturday is Dijon Lee. True freshman, 5-star from California, really been turning heads, but just a really a physical phenomenon. If you look at the guy, 6'4", around 210, 212. The range and just the length of his arms, his wingspan is what is going to make it extremely difficult for quarterbacks to fit throws into the tight windows for any receiver. And, just the length that he is going to present and the problem that he's going to present in coverage for a lot of these quarterbacks. And the fact that he is running with the ones and the fact that he's getting these reps is showing you that, one, the quality of the recruit, two, the quality of his work and the fact that he has picked up on this defense extremely quickly. So again, I'm excited to see him. He's I think he's going to be one of those aggressive corners. Alabama has, extensive history of having those aggressive corners. And, you can go back even, pre-Saban era. They've always had some pretty good corners. And again, so, the ultimate question of the defense is that, how good do they want to be? And I think they can be as good as they want to be and when they choose to be. And I just think the attitude and the overall chemistry of this team this year is just something that is extremely different than last year. I think they're motivated, they're hungry, they want it, and they're itching to go. So I think this defense, also the advice to Ty Simpson is, don't be afraid to lean on your defense, for the first few weeks. AJ did it in 2011. A couple other guys, they had to do it as well. The defense can help. I'm not going to say win you games, but as this offense gets going, as this jam starts to return and really settle into this, and then when the offense gets clicking and your defense is already clicking, then you've got a heck of a championship caliber team. So again, the defense, it's not just hype, it's the standard. Again, as I mentioned. So now that moves us on to our last segment before we get into our preview and predictions. And this is just to address some of the disrespect. Florida State quarterback Tony Castellanos has recently and in the last few months, come out with a few comments. And, one in particular, just kind of quoting off of the cuff here, but, Alabama doesn't have Saban to come save them anymore. I don't think they can stop me. I'm not worried about Alabama. And, part of it I understand from an athlete's standpoint. Florida State just went 2-10 a year ago. You're trying to instill some confidence, trying to get these guys any type of motivation as well. But the other thing is that, Tommy, if you really want to go down that road, aren't you the same guy who quit on your team halfway through the year last year because you got replaced by a freshman? Are you the same guy who basically shut yourself down and, quit on your team and, enter the transfer portal the first chance you got? So, and then just a few days ago, him saying the best defense he's going to see all year is the one that he plays against in practice every day. And again, a lot of guys say that. It's fine. But the only thing I'll say is, it goes with the noise. A lot of people are writing Alabama off. They're crowning Georgia, Ohio State, Texas. And, and then you got guys like Tommy, running his mouth and, saying that, it's potentially going to be a beatdown. And, history tells us something. Alabama is the most dangerous when people doubt them. So, like 2009, for example, everybody said that Tim Tebow in Florida was unbeatable again. They were going to probably go back to the championship. And Alabama took care of business in the SEC title. 2015, the dynasty was supposedly done after Alabama lost to Ole Miss earlier in the season. Alabama then didn't lose another game from there on out. Obviously beating Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, LSU, Auburn, Florida, and then Michigan State and Clemson to win the national title. 2020, same story. Everybody said, the year after Tua left, they said, don't really know if the team's going to do it. It seems like every time they've been basically looked down on, every time they've been any doubt, it's the same story. We thrive on the disrespect. We thrive on the negativity. And so Castellanos, he may think he's just talking. He may think that he's hyping his guys up. But what he's done is just add fuel to the already burning fire and flame of this team. And I'll tell you one thing, Alabama doesn't forget, and they will remember those words come Saturday. And, as Tim Keenan and, obviously Lawson and a few other guys said, the disrespect will be addressed. And I do think that they're going to back themselves up on this word. So that leads us into our final segment. Alabama, Florida State, and a little background on the series history. So, when you talk about, the series, it's very short, but it's very powerful in a sense. Alabama leads the series all-time 3-1-1. So a total of 5 meetings. This will be the 6th all-time meeting between the two. The first one was in 1965. Florida State came into Tuscaloosa. Nobody gave them a shot, and that was actually the only tie of this series. A 37-37 tie against legendary coach Paul Bear Bryant. It was a program building moment really for Florida State at that point. And then in the 1970s, Alabama in 1974 really flexed a 38-0 stomping of the Seminoles. And then an 8-7 slugfest the very next season in 75. Then you have to fast forward all the way to 2007 in Jacksonville, Nick Saban's first season at Alabama. And, Florida State did get the better of them that day, 21-14. And that's the last time that Florida State has, and the only time that they have beaten Alabama. And then in 2017, everybody really remembers, tabbed as the greatest kickoff of all time, 1-3 in Atlanta to start the season. And Alabama would eventually, they were coming off, a national championship loss to Clemson the year prior. Florida State was picked to have a very good year and to probably be in the playoff picture. Again, the most hyped opener ever. And Alabama just went in and absolutely dominated 24-7. Florida State lost their quarterback in DeAndre Francois, and it really derailed their whole season. Ended up going 6-7 that year, dropping out, of the playoff conversation entirely. Alabama, of course, went on to win the national championship, and we saw how that turned out in the same building against Georgia for 2nd and 26. So really, the point is, when Alabama and FSU meet, it's a tone setter, it's a statement game, and Saturday afternoon is not going to be any different at this point. So what happens this time? Let's just walk through it. So you've got an Alabama team. Well, here, let's start with Florida State, actually. You have a Florida State team coming off their worst season probably in program history, or at least in recent program history. 2-10. You didn't win an ACC game. You've got a disgruntled fan base. You've got probably some disgruntled boosters, some executive leadership. And you really have to wonder, is Mike Norvell's job safe? You go 13-0 the year prior, and then 13-1 after the loss in the Orange Bowl. You get really gypped out of the playoff. I think they should have been in over Texas. And then the next year you follow that up with 2-10. Your offense was very inconsistent a year ago. Your defense was good, but not good enough to win and get stops where it counted. But you bring in Gus from UCF as your OC. You beef up a little bit in the transfer portal. You get a quarterback like Tony Castellanos. And I'm not denying that he's a good athlete. He is a good athlete. He's very quick. I think he's very mobile. I think he's going to try to use his feet against Alabama. I think they're going to put him in a position to use his feet against Alabama. And I will say he is a very tough quarterback to stop. And dual threat quarterbacks in the past have given Alabama problems. But I think you got a Florida State team that you can get one of two teams. They're either going to be extremely motivated, or they're going to come in a little too overconfident, and history could repeat itself with a 2017 or a 1974. But I think Florida State is going to come in. I think they're going to be focused. I think they're going to be ready. And, obviously it's in Tallahassee. It's a very hard place to play. I know the war chant definitely won't be quiet, anything but quiet on Saturday. And then you shift over to Alabama. Alabama kind of had a different dynamic of what they've been in recent years. But you return a lot of familiar faces, a lot of veteran leadership. You do have a new quarterback. It's his first true start, and a road start at that, in a hostile environment. Weather not supposed to be great. Could be a downpour, could be wet conditions. So this bodes well for this really kind of goes into the makings of an interesting game. If it's a downpour and it's a running game, this could be a very low-scoring game. But if it's able to have the ball aired out, Alabama could put up some points here. So I think, first quarter you're going to have a little bit of nerves. You could have a few errors, and, maybe even Florida State lands that first punch. As I said, Castellanos is a dangerous player. And, he's going to make a play or two. But Alabama keeps it close and, has some clock control. And then, the second quarter, you start to settle in. Ty starts to really settle into the offense. He finds the rhythm. And, Grubb really starts calling these plays and really starts dialing in and really getting some tempo, and the running back by committee, really starts to get going. Ryan Williams steps up. Jalen Hale, Isaiah Horton, big transfer from Miami, he starts to step up. And I think Alabama starts to really take command and find the lead, find their footing, really kind of holding their ground. I think third quarter, I think that's where the defense really kind of flips the game at this point. I think that's when your defense has got to kick it into overdrive. You got to get those guys up front like James Smith and Overton and Keeley and Collins and Jefferson and Green and Lawson and Russaw really getting after the quarterback, forcing Castellanos into some errors, into some overthrows, into some underthrows, into some interceptions. And Alabama's defense needs to become suffocating at that point. I think that's where you see that, drives start to stall, they get stops, and the momentum really swings heavy in Alabama's favor at this point. And I think fourth quarter, I think that's just where your conditioning comes in. I mean, obviously it's going to be in Tallahassee, it's going to be hot, it's going to be humid, especially if the weather holds up like it's planning to. And, but then I think Simpson is going to hit that one dagger of a touchdown that's just going to put the nail in the coffin overall. And I think the run game can bleed the clock. I think the defense is going to get enough stops. And, I think by then, you've broken the will of Florida State at this point. And, that's what we have to do. That's what Alabama has to do. They have to go in and control the game. And this game can go one of two ways. This game is either going to be a close game headed into the fourth quarter, and it's going to be a fight to the end. And it's going to be whichever team can execute more efficiently in that fourth quarter, or Alabama's going to run away with this game. And I don't think there's any in between. Anything's possible, so I'm not going to rule out anything. But for me personally, I think you control what you can control. Ty, don't try to do too much. Just be you. Use your guys around you. Lean on the defense. And the defense, as far as that, fall back to your training. This is a very good quality opener, but it's not Ohio State, it's not Texas, it's not Georgia. It is Florida State. They are a Power 4 team, and they do have good athletes. They have Power 4 athletes. And this isn't a hostile environment, but the key is thrive off that hostility. Use it to your advantage. Turn it into a weakness for them. Because you start landing these punches, you start landing a couple touchdown drives and get some stops and force them into some errors, that crowd gets quiet very quickly. So overall, do I necessarily think it's going to be a blowout? No. But do I think it's going to be convincing? Yes. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be enough to send a statement. And I think that's what we need to do this Saturday. Really start our 2025 season off with a statement. So my final score is going to be Alabama 31, Florida State 17. I think Tide pulls away fourth quarter, really takes over with the run game. The conditioning really starts to show up, and the depth starts to show up as well. So again, there you have it. Ty Simpson's going to have his whole moment. The running back by committee has really got something to prove this season. A defense that has a lot of veteran leadership and a lot of good young and scary elite talent. The opener against Florida State that's really going to shape, the outlook on our season headed into, SEC play. And, the disrespect is there. But Saturday afternoon, Alabama has the chance to remind the country what the standard looks like. And, again, I think this team is poised to do something special. They have the talent. I think they have the coaching. They've got to execute. They've got to play for each other. They've got to be there for each other at this point. And overall, I think we're going to see a very, very good result on Saturday. Once again, this has been the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor. On Instagram, X, and TikTok. It is down there in the bottom left corner at the.bama.factor. Factor. Get us to 30K followers on Instagram by the end of the season. That is our goal. We appreciate your following, your comments, your likes, your views. This has been such a great season and great year overall for that page. A lot of growth. You guys are what keeps the page supported and going. So again, appreciate you very well. And also stick around for next week's show as we are happy to be back this season. And we will be with you all season bringing you in-depth analysis, game previews, game recaps, game highlights, and any other expert analysis that we can. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you want us to talk about a specific segment, a specific player, a moment in a game. We are open to anything and any suggestions here on the show, and I strive to make this show the best I possibly can for you, the fans of Alabama, the fans of college football, because that is where this sport is so great, is because of people like you with the fans. And we look ahead to what's next. We look forward to next week's show as we will recap the Florida State game and preview Alabama's home opener against Louisiana Monroe. And again, this is the Bama Factor with Alex Taylor, and Alabama is still the standard. Good night, and God bless, and roll Tide.